On today's Newsmakers, Kirk Cameron, near-death experiences and miracles, that and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable figures. On today's Newsmakers, we're starting out with a conversation about Colton Burpo. You might know him as the real-life inspiration for the book and film Heaven is for Real, but he's all grown up now and he's here to share his powerful faith journey. Let's welcome him to the show. Colton Burpo, it has been a long time since you and I have chatted. Last time we chatted, you were probably around 20 or 25 now. And before that, you were in high school when the film came out. I saw you in New York. You came to the Blaze where I was working at the time and had a chance to interview you. But I've tracked your family over the years. We've done many interviews. I've talked to your parents many times. And here's the thing. I want to talk about the fact that you're going to be a worship leader, or that you are a worship leader at your church. Faith for you has continued to be a centerpiece in your life. What do you think it is that has kept faith at the center for you?
Well, the biggest thing for me is when I was in high school, obviously traveling for the ministry, traveling for the book, traveling for the movie. At that point in time, I was just kind of going because I was told by my parents, all right, we're going here. All right, we're doing this. Like, I didn't really have that much of a say. But I remember in high school, that's around the time that God really started challenging me, like, hey, you don't have to rely on this one experience with me. Like, I want to do life with you. I want to be a part of your life today. And it took me a while to get to that point. But as you see now, like, I take my faith very seriously. I'm on staff at a church, even though growing up a pastor's kid, I said, I never want to be on staff at a church. Here I am on
And
staff at
here
a
you
church.
are.
One thing I'd recommend, never tell God, like, I'm never going to do this, because
You'll do it.
you might end up doing it. But faith has been something very core to me, because obviously, if I'm not living my life to give glory and honor to Jesus and whatever I'm doing, then it's not really worth it. So on top of like all the other stuff, like I'm really involved also in like our youth ministry at our church as well. So it's been really cool now that I'm like a little older. I haven't experienced full life yet, but just a little bit older, I'm able to look back at like some of these middle schoolers and high schoolers and just try to encourage them in their faith, to try and help them out, because I've looked back many times and I've thanked my previous youth leaders, because I was like, oh man, these kids are rough. Oh man, I was worse. And
Uh,
it was a good conversation with one of my youth leaders I'm still in contact with. And he was like, yeah, you were a pain. And I'm like,
And
sorry.
now you're seeing the other side of that. You know, I think something you just said is really interesting to me about the idea that you didn't have to rely on this one experience. Most people in life do not get the spiritual experience that you had. And your experience, obviously a mega viral experience. It was a feature film. It was a book, Heaven is for Real. For those who don't know, and I know this is a loaded question, can you take us through, and then I want to work back into your life now, but what was the event when you were 4 that happened, and how did it change you?
Yeah. So obviously, for people that don't know, with Heaven is for Real, what happened is when I was 3 years old, almost 4, I had a ruptured appendix. I had appendicitis. Doctors misdiagnosed it. They didn't catch it for about 5 days. And then when the doctors finally figured out what was going on, I went into emergency surgery. And during that first surgery, that's when I had my near-death experience, where I remember lifting out of my body. I looked down, I saw the doctors, they were working on me. My mom, I saw her in one room. She was like on the phone talking with people, praying. My dad, he was in another room and he was praying very loudly at God. And at the moment, I was freaking out. I had no idea what was going on. Then I was sitting on Jesus's lap and he had some angels sing to me to calm me down. And then after that, Jesus had one of the angels fly me to heaven. And what I get to do is I get to share my experience, my memories of heaven, and share the hope of heaven with people. And that's kind of heaven is for real in a nutshell. I had a near death experience. I came back, and when you read the story or watch the movie, it's from my dad's perspective of he was a pastor and his son just went to heaven. How do you deal with that?
Well, I love that. I love that. What is your, final message to people today? If people out there are struggling right now, they're looking for hope and they're looking at your story and maybe they haven't had the kind of miracle you did. Most people haven't. They haven't had the kind of breakthroughs that you have. What would you say to them to encourage them to see the goodness of God without having that sort of experience?
Hmm. Well, what I would encourage anyone that's listening with, whether they are a believer, not a believer, whatever it may be, one thing that has greatly impacted my faith today, like not just, oh, back when I was like 4 or back when I was 11, this happened, but like it still affects me today, is praying like, Lord, would you please reveal yourself to me? God, please show me that you are real. God, I want you to be an active participant in my life.
Mm.
Because through the Holy Spirit living inside of us, he wants us to do that. Through studying scripture, he wants to teach us. He wants to help us. He wants to guide us.
Man.
And what I would just encourage all the listeners is whether you are a follower of Christ or whether you're not, Jesus loves you so much that he always has his hand out. He always wants to take you by the hand. He wants to uplift you. He wants to comfort you. He wants to be with you. All you have to do is take his hand.
That is powerful. I'm going to tell you, you thought you weren't going to be on, a church staff, but you're a preacher, just like your dad. So here you are preaching. That was powerful. And listen, Colton, we're going to have you back again very soon. We'll let your baby come first, which is super exciting. We are very, very happy for you and just
Mhm.
appreciate you taking the time, updating us, taking us through your story today. Truly appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
What an incredible journey. If you're looking for more stories like this, head on over and check out our new documentary, Investigating the Supernatural Miracles. You can find it at cbn.com/supernatural. We'll be back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Next up, actor Kirk Cameron has a message for Disney amid the latest controversy over Snow White. He also has a new kids show that you won't want to miss. Let's welcome Kirk here to Newsmakers. Well, Kirk, a lot to talk about. I feel like every time we reconnect, there's been 30 new things in the culture that have unfolded. The latest thing is this debacle over Disney's Snow White remake. What do you make of this controversy?
Well, apparently Disney is just not listening to the message. When you go woke, you go broke. Hey, is it okay if I wear these glasses? I figure it makes me look more like you.
Yes, yeah, you got it. You got to do it.
Okay. Yes, Disney and Snow White are continuing to go down a road that parents don't want. I mean, trust matters to parents. And when you take a beloved movie like Snow White and you strip it of what is true and what is good and what is beautiful, and you start replacing it with actors and other values that are going against all of that, parents are going to start looking for alternatives. And fortunately, I've been connected with some really innovative people that are creative, that love God, that love the family, and love our country. And we're making new television shows and books, and that's what we're talking about today. Is a brand new kids TV show called Iggy and Mr. Kirk. It's the new Mr. Rogers, and it's teaching kids wholesome lessons and igniting their imaginations for good.
Yeah. Well, and all the things that, people want Disney to be and that Disney maybe was at one point, that's sort of evaporated. And to your point, and I want to get into the show and talk about that. And Trent, I want to come to you in a minute, but it's interesting. in light of where we are right now, everything you just mentioned, why in the world, after losing so much money again and again and again with these films, does Disney not get it? You know, why are they not telling these actors to maybe not go? I mean, look, they can think and believe whatever they want, but maybe when you're promoting a film, you should be careful about the things you're saying, right, while that's going on. Kirk, why do you think Hollywood doesn't seem to get this, even though the evidence is there?
Well, because they're ultimately not serving the people. Now, that may seem counterintuitive and like, well, Kurt, you could argue with me about this. But at the end of the day, this is a business. And you would think, well, but you know, why doesn't Target switch all their stuff around? Why do they still offer, you know, tuck pockets for girls' bikinis, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense when the parents don't want that and they're not showing up to buy that stuff. Well, when you're funded by great big funds like BlackRock and State Street and all of this other stuff, you can see videos where they're saying, look, there's a bigger financial loss for companies than just the customer not buying their stuff. And that is that their investors, their funders are telling them, we want these values pushed from the top down. And I suspect that that's what's going on. Now, you can't do that forever. If ultimately you can't sell your movies in the box office, well, then you've got to come up with a different strategy eventually. But I think they've still got some staying power, and we'll see how long it lasts. In the meantime, parents have a viable alternative with Brave Plus, which is an amazing new streaming platform with time-tested, parent-vetted content like Iggy and Mr. Kirk, like Bob the Builder, Strawberry Shortcake, and others that they can go to, and it's safe without a second thought. It's teaching their kids character, virtue, and faith.
When you have a name like you have and people know you and there's that trust built, you then move into this really interesting area of a kid's show. Why was it important for you to do The Adventures of Iggy and Mr. Kirk and to kind of go into this arena, which I think it's in light of what you've done in recent years, similar but different from a lot of the things you've done in the past?
Two things. One, I think it's divine direction. I think God opens doors and closes other doors. And then number two, it's because I have kids of my own and I have a granddaughter. And so I want to help build a library of books and TV shows that she can watch that I know is going to be developmentally good for her, that's going to teach her virtue and introduce her to God and concepts like forgiveness and truthfulness and overcoming fear and teamwork and telling the truth. All of this stuff seems to have been lost in the interest of companies that just want to make money, entertain your kids with digital junk food. But we want to get back to the things that are actually going to nourish them and be good for their hearts and minds.
At the end of the day, Kirk, just as we sort of round out the conversation, when you think about your legacy in entertainment, you've done a lot in entertainment across the board. What for you is the most important thing that you will be remembered for, that you will accomplish, that you will do in this space?
I don't know. I guess we got to wait and see what people will remember. But when we're talking about this space, I assume you're talking about family entertainment and children's programming. So, you know, when I was on Growing Pains, that's going to be something that people will probably always remember because that was a family show and I was a kid. But I really do believe and I honestly think that this could be the most important thing that I've ever made. And that's why I'm so grateful for Brave Books and Brave Plus, is that we talk so much now in the news about making America great again and healthy again and safe again. And PBS is on trial. I mean, PBS is where the first Mr. Rogers was aired for the country. And now they're on trial for spending hundreds of millions of dollars on radical leftist woke ideology and pumping kids' heads full of this kind of stuff. And I want to get back to giving kids good, wholesome things that are fun for them to watch. They're engaging, they're visually beautiful, and that nourish their hearts and minds. So what could be more important than that?
I love it. That is a great legacy to have. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Billy.
You can download the Brave Plus app to watch Adventures with Iggy and Mr. Kirk right now. And we'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are sitting down with Chris Gunderson. His remarkable healing story we tell in the new film investigating the supernatural miracles, and it will leave you transfixed because he was unable to eat for the first 16 years of his life until God stepped in and a miracle happened. Let's welcome Chris to Newsmakers. Let's kind of go back. You as a baby were diagnosed with a very serious digestive issue. Let's just start there. Tell us a little bit about that and how it impacted your life.
Yeah, so I was born with a syndrome called chronic pseudo obstruction syndrome, and it was a congenital defect. So I was born with it. Basically, where my stomach was completely paralyzed, they call it complete gastroparesis, and it wouldn't pump anything from my stomach to my small intestine. So everything I ate for when I was a child, um, for actually for when I was an infant would just projectile vomit and just vomit everything up. And so I wasn't able to actually get any kind of nutrition for a long period of time. It took my parents and the doctors several studies and diagnostic tests to figure out that that was truly the case, that I had complete gastroparesis.
So at some point, you guys decide to go to an event where there are healing prayers being uttered, right? I mean, you decide. What was it that caused your family, even though you didn't necessarily believe this was something that could happen, to go to that event?
So Bruce Venata, this was back in November of 2011, and Bruce Venata was at this benefit dinner for children in Honduras, and he was telling his testimony. My parents had attended, and my mom was hearing his testimony, and during the whole time that Bruce was talking, my mom was hearing God tell her to go talk to him. He was saying a lot of familiar medical terminology that most people wouldn't really know because of what Bruce had gone through and what I've gone through. And God had made it where there was no one talking to him at the time, so she went up and talked to him and told him about me. I was actually currently home at the time. I wasn't there, but she had asked if he could pray for me, and he's like, "Where is he at?" Said that he was at home, didn't want to come here because he's a 16-year-old, not wanting to come to a benefit dinner. So he said that he was going to be talking at this church for the next day on Sunday, and why don't you bring your whole family there? And so she had come home with my dad and told me about it. And it wasn't really like I was in denial that it could happen, but there was some thing that kind of got to me when she was telling me about his story, his testimony. And I'm like, you know what? Sure, why not? I was actually really excited to like meet Bruce, hear his testimony, and like the more I like thought about it later on, the more I like came to realize that I was going to get healed.
When you were feeling that, was that a spiritual feeling? Like you felt like God was delivering that message to you that the healing was going to come?
He had given me a little nudge that night, but especially when we were there at that church the next day, um I had this pulsating sensation in my abdomen that I hadn't had before. And I was like, what's going on? And God said he's preparing me. And I haven't really ever heard from God too much before in my spirit. I didn't know how to really listen to his voice, listen to the Holy Spirit's voice. And so I was kind of having like this dialect with God. And he said that I'm preparing you and I'm working on you. And I told him back then I had a very severe stutter. Like I couldn't talk or anything. I had a terrible stammer. I had tics and everything that I was just trying to like force words out, just wouldn't flow or anything. So I told God for when I was 16, during that time that I was having that pulsating sensation, that I said, if you heal me, I will not be quiet about it. I'll tell anyone and everyone about this testimony, about this miracle that you did for me. And so now we're here.
Now we're here.
But
I mean,
yeah.
so final question for you, because the story is incredible. How did this, not what, but how did this change your view of God, and where are you now today with him because of it?
Before my tubes, I saw God as this higher being that's just kind of up there and not really having a deep, meaningful relationship with us. And now I actually have this inner dialect with him on, I would say, not a daily basis, because I'm not a perfect person. I'm not always in prayer on a daily basis. I try to, but I would at least say on a weekly basis, like I'm always reaching out to him, and I feel like it's this two-way conversation, and like it's made me a better person. I'm not perfect. I actually fell into some sin shortly afterwards, doing stupid stuff, and so um if you sin or whatever, your healing's not going to be taken away. I actually was told by one of my teachers that my healing was going to be taken away because I had sinned, or I should be careful or something like that. I'm like, you know what? When God does something, he does it. And it's for you to be a blessing to others for, and to have that testimony for as well. But it made me also realize that like it's okay to fall short, because we all fall short of the glory of God, and just to keep trying, because it's a continuous relationship and a continuous walk with him.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, taking us through all this. It's an incredible testimony. People can see us to actually talk about it and break it down in the documentary. And I'm just grateful that you came on and spoke with us. Would love to have you back again, and appreciate your time today.
Definitely. Thank you much, Billy.
What a powerful story. We will be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you'll find the full interviews you saw on today's episode. We will see you next week for another episode of the show.